Welcome back again, podcast friends. And today I've got another interview that I think you're going to absolutely love. And this is with Dr. Martin Katz. And thank you, Dr. Katz, very much for offering to be on this podcast with me today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait for our listeners to hear what you have to say to them. Now, just so you know, Dr. Martin Katz is double board certified in both sports medicine and in family medicine. He's committed to a preventative medicine paradigm, educating his patients regarding the benefits of intentional nutrition, exercise, sleep, the microbiome, and connectivity. And so I'm very excited to hear what Dr. Katz has to tell us today. I actually met Martin when if you guys have been following me, you know that I just gave a talk down in Virginia about a month ago. And Dr. Katz was actually at the talk. And so we got to meet and we just kind of hit it off. And actually found out that he graduated from the same place that I did my pediatric residency in Charleston, South Carolina at MUSC. And Dr. Katz had started there the year right after I left. So we didn't get to meet each other there, but we've met each other now. And I want to thank you so much for being able to feed our audience with a lot of more information that they need. And Dr. Katz is actually he's kind of they use integrative physician or functional medicine. And so just right off the bat, tell us a little bit about how you started down the standard medical path and what made you switch over into becoming a integrative physician.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's based out of need, right? So we start off in medical school and we get a phenomenal education with regard to pathophysiology and anatomy and, the medications and the pharmacopoeia that's out there. So we get a robust education with regard to that. But what's remarkable is they're missing some fairly key components of human physiology that are incredibly important. And so you're launched from medical school to residency, and in residency, they're trying to teach you the basics of you have a patient presentation. So we call it SOAP notes, a subjective. What are they coming in with? What are they complaining? What are they complaining of? What are their medical problems? The objective, what are their findings, your assessment, and then the plan. And the plan at that point generally really incorporated if one of three things maybe. What medications were you going to be giving them? Where were you going to be referring them if needed? And what kind of therapy would they need? Physical therapy, occupational. So there was really quite a limited amount of things in the armamentarium. And if one drug didn't work, what other drug would you use? And or multiple drugs with regard to hypertension. I graduated now 25 plus years ago. There weren't as many hypertensive drugs. There weren't as many diabetic drugs as there are now. There was the SSRI class. There was the Elavils and the MOAs, which you wouldn't use because you're so afraid of side effects. And so there was a limited amount, and it got fairly frustrating after 6 years of practicing. I felt like there had to be more, and fortunately in residency I had some older guys that graduated with us, and hopefully as you get older you get more wise. At least you certainly get more knowledgeable, and you have more experiences, and if you use those experiences and combine it with knowledge you get more wise anyway. Just
Right.
don't make the same old mistakes over and over again. And these guys had seen, I guess, some of the problems with medicine. And one of the guys introduced me to the idea of keto through Atkins. And I didn't buy into it at that point because we were so brainwashed with the whole idea of fats being bad and causing cardiovascular disease, which at that point and unbelievably still is and has been the leading cause of death in this and so many other countries. Cardiovascular disease, that we put in $2 billion in research every year, and here we still are 30 years later with the leading cause of death. And so there's something else going on. I mean, we have
Right.
the best procedures, we have supposedly the best drugs. What is going on? And then we have, again, just a limited approach. And then, sorry, I had another guy who was starting to do acupuncture, and I probably using some herbals at that point and having some really good success with some of his patients. I probably at that point in my life, scrubbed it up to the placebo
Right.
effect, or the obiculp
Mm.
effect.
Which is actually
And
extremely powerful.
which
You
which
know?
is an extremely powerful. I mean, he was certainly bought into it, and and there's nothing wrong with using some of that effect to be positive for sure. And so I didn't totally buy into it at that point, but then I was certainly trying to get healthier myself after not being terribly healthy in medical school and after, which is sort of a paradox.
But
Um,
common.
What very common. Yeah,
Very
very, very
common.
common. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lack of sleep and residency as well, eating terribly. I mean, it wasn't unusual for us to have a long night of studying, go to, Waffle House and ordering 5 plates of stuff. I mean, it was ridiculous.
And that does
Um,
make it hard. I mean, you have to look at it when you're going into your physician and he weighs 350 pounds and he's
yeah.
telling you how to be healthy. I mean, it's got to make you question what's going on here.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
In our hospital, I think the cardiologists were the last ones to quit smoking,
yeah.
which is pretty remarkable. The nurses still, to some degree, smoke, but um, hopefully that's becoming
Yeah.
less and less frequent or popular. But yeah, so there was this sort of, I felt frustrated, and then I had two pretty negative outcomes in private practice, where this wonderful, wonderful lady, I don't know, she must have, it's been so long ago now, but she must have come to see me every 4 weeks, sometimes maybe as long as 12 weeks, just this ongoing nagging depression. And we tried everything at our, this medication, that medication, this combination of medications, and she never really responded. And at that point, I wasn't armored with the understanding of what nutrients and sleep and hydration and exercise and community can do for a person. And so that wasn't the focus and the emphasis. And she ended up committing suicide, and it just
Oh,
hit me
oh my
really,
gosh.
really, really hard, that was the outcome after all this.
That's
And
and that's actually a very common adverse effect to psychotic
right,
type medications. That I mean,
right,
you can read on there that suicide ideation is increased by a lot,
right.
which is
And
horrible.
so I certainly appreciate that and started looking into it, and that was sort of probably one of the nails. And then this whole young heart attack problem, where you treat people with the beta block and the statin and the this, and they don't necessarily give up their unhealthy habits. And they, if it's a stent, they block the stent. If it's an event and they have a cabbage and they block that vessel, it's a tough road to hoe. And I had a really negative outcome with regard to that, and I was like, what are we doing here?
Right,
What am
right.
I doing here? And so, and so I'd started doing triathlons and seeing the benefit of that and just the community it built. I actually started a triathlon here in Charlottesville back in 2002, just a remarkable race, and had some folks who, had gone from the couch to doing these sprint triathlons, and how much better they had, and how much better they looked, and their blood pressures. And I was like, wow, well, this is amazing. And decided to go do a sports medicine fellowship. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it was a great fellowship, but it still had a lot to do with, here's your surgery, or if not surgery, here's your drug or your cast. There wasn't, we still weren't emphasizing this importance of recovery. So what are you doing to support your health, and what are you doing to support the cells on their movement towards health? And just started reading. I think I started sort of more down the vegan pathway. So the China study and Forks Over Knives. Michael Pollan became one of my favorite authors,
Mhm.
with Omnivore's Dilemma, and just understanding the food experience and how we weren't helping people understand what it is they were putting in their bodies, and how
Right,
that had such an amazing, obvious. I mean, it's just so obvious what you put in your body
right,
would have an effect. We have these physicians who are Western trained. They're like, you got to take your meds. It's going to have a positive effect, but
right,
nutrition doesn't matter. Like,
right.
how is that even possible?
See, and that's what
Um,
I've tried telling people too is like most medications we have now do not cure anything. All they're doing is
no,
they're just symptomatic relief. If you got high blood pressure, we'll take care of that. If you have high triglycerides, we'll take care of that. but they're not asking what's causing blood pressure, what's causing this. And when you look at the nutrition, you find, oh, I know exactly what is doing this. And it's amazing how important nutrition is that we're not telling people.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. I can drive my blood pressure out by having some, or let's just say, your pulse rate up by having some stressful event. It's really easy to check your pulse rate, right? And so there's an event that's happening external to you that's having a significant effect. If you could check your blood pressure, you'd see it's likely going up as well. And so this long-term chronic effect, tobacco use has an endothelial effect. What you're doing to those endothelium, the foods, these inflammatory foods that we eat have an incredible effect. The endothelium's, I mean, the liver sees it first, but it's taken to the liver by the vasculature, and so the
Right.
endothelial cells are seeing. And if those are damaged throughout the system, good luck being healthy.
And just in case you don't know what he's talking about, the endothelial cells, he's talking about the inner lining of your blood vessels. So all those are endothelial cells, and that's where a lot of this damage starts occurring when you start eating poor nutrition, and it really tears up the endothelial, and that's the beginning of all the trouble that you had. The high insulin levels and the inflammation that all the damage does to these blood vessels. That's where you go into all your organ damage and everything else that comes. So by taking care of nutrition, that's what we're trying to do is decrease all the stuff that's causing endothelial lining damage.
Yeah, I mean,
Just thought I'd
yeah.
throw that out there.
No, absolutely. I think it's really important to understand. I mean, that is the basis of how I try to practice, is understanding that there is a cell that is having an effect by what you provide it.
Right.
And it's just incredibly important to understand that. And once you start understanding that, going to want to provide that cell the best, just as you provide your car with the best gas. I mean, why wouldn't you provide your food with the best? Provide your body with the best food that motivates and drives the system. It
Right.
just makes a lot of sense. And so, you know, I I started down that vegan pathway, and I would say if you're looking at a cardiovascular problem, it wasn't a bad way to go. I mean, if you can get somebody to eat a plant-strong diet, and again, there's veganism and there's veganism. If you're doing cookie dough and pasta and
Right.
breads,
Right.
certainly you're vegan, but Lord have mercy, you're not a healthy vegan. But if
That's
you're
right.
if you're doing the healthier version of that, there's a good chance that you're going to have a positive effect on the system. But ultimately, if you make a change away from the sad diet, the standard American diet, positive
Right.
things are going to happen. And things have changed since then. I've realized there's other ways. It's not just veganism. There are many, many, many different ways to get healthy. And you know over the, I don't know how many years, probably 10, I've realized that, holy moly, what that guy in residency was saying about this whole Atkins approach has a lot of feasibility.
Yeah.
Again, maybe Atkins didn't get it completely right, but
Right.
there
He was
was
close.
he was pretty darn tootin' close, like amazingly. Like, I can't believe that, but yeah, it's believable. And now that I absolutely listen to my patients and support them. And you watch the numbers, whether it's, their diabetic numbers, their blood pressure numbers, their weight, their body composition. It has a remarkable effect. And that's really what it's about.
Right. And I read something just last week talking about blood pressure, saying that about 90% of all patients with high blood pressure is probably insulin resistant, even if they don't have glucose problems yet, but they've been insulin resistant for a while, because that's one of the number one reasons why people get high blood pressure is because of high insulin levels, which comes from your high carbohydrates. But I was
Yeah,
wondering,
I
I was
mean that
listening.
that that could be, certainly from the cell, the kidney damage from the uric acid of the sugar
Yeah.
breakdown. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean these things are absolutely, again, it's what's happening at the cellular level that's creating this damage. But Steve, I'm not a one guy. I don't believe it's just carbohydrates. It certainly
Exactly.
is,
Exactly.
and it certainly is processed carbohydrates and the inflammation's having. But one of the things, hopefully we'll talk about this a little later. I started a supplement company, and one of the things that we are absolutely encouraged by, well, encouraged by in a good way, but unfortunately the opposite is true, is this whole idea of synergy. And that's what we don't necessarily understand. Even the EPA and the FDA and all these companies, they say, oh, well, here's a drug. It seems to be safe by itself. Maybe. However, if you add it to this and add it to this, you get negative synergy. So 1 plus 1, remember there's additive, which is 1 plus 1 equals 2, but synergy is 1 plus 1, or 1 times 1 would be generally 1, but now it's 5,
Mhm.
and so, there's 80,000 toxins out there, and maybe each individual toxin doesn't look that bad, but when you start adding 80,000 toxins, even if it's 5, that synergy has an incredible, so
Exactly.
there's toxins out there. We're way too stressed as a society, certainly with social media, and understanding what dopamine does to us, and this whole
Right.
understanding of, what are our wants, what are our needs in this. We won't get into it on this podcast, but we seem to be a nation far in favor of our wants and not understanding our needs enough. And so
Exactly.
we're a wants nation, not a needs nation. And yeah, it's great to want some things and obtain them and have goals, but are your needs being met? Are
Right.
those
At what
essential
cost?
basics being met? And are we protecting that system? Because you can certainly go out and buy another house, another car, but boy, good luck buying another body. You can buy
Right.
parts of it, but there's
Yeah. And
complications
then
there too.
that's right. There's lots of complication with that too.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Dr. Jason Fung,
Oh
the,
yeah.
the obesity code, diabetes code? I was listening to a girl who worked with him, and she was talking about how awesome it is to work at an office where when patients come in, they're happy. They're getting off their medications. Their disease state is actually reversing, and they don't have type 2 diabetes anymore. She said it is such a different office to be in when everybody's happy. Do you experience that? Are you still seeing patients and guiding them and getting that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just had this gentleman last week who came in. He's a pastor, a local African American pastor, and that he's listened very well, but hasn't implemented necessarily.
Yeah.
Pastors have
As a lot of us.
pastors, yeah, as a lot of folks. But he's listened, he's heard. His wife's listened. She's a patient too. Just incredibly wonderful people. And pastors have it's hard. They're trying to shepherd to their flock and trying to take them and make them spiritually more enriched and bring them along, and they have challenges and they're pulled in this direction and that direction, and he he hadn't been spoken to in a way that um, convinced him that this was the way. And I got his wife on board, fortunately, and she started implementing some changes. And quite naturally, he came on board.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it takes that fantastic partner. And boy, since he noticed just a little bit of, wow, I am feeling better. The numbers are improving. My blood pressure is improving. He's gone full tilt, and now he wants me there talking to his congregation, and just an amazing turnaround. And we see this enough, but
Yeah.
I have other patients who, I mean, I've literally, Steve, banged my head against a cupboard to show folks that if you bang your head against a cupboard, you'll have an effect. It's going to hurt. And if I bang long enough, I likely may fracture my skull. And that's what smoking is. While you smoke, there's so much damage going on. To come in and ask me, what am I going to do for your health? It's you're just missed the point. And so
Right.
I try to make these elaborate points with my patients. The other day, actually, I was telling my wife, I was talking to this patient about the basics of health, and I was showing how if you kick a soccer ball by planting your foot and kicking through the soccer ball at the goal, it's great. But if you sort of do a donkey kick backwards, good luck. You may score, you may not. The ball may go anywhere. You may not. You may even miss the point.
Mm.
But the floor was slippery, and I like did this weird kick and I fell, and like I make this huge noise, and the staff comes running. The patient was like, "Are you okay?" And it was just, yeah. So
What
I try to make these points, and
was it, during
sometimes
the
it
donkey
backfires.
kick or was it during the planted foot kick
No,
that
the
you
planted
fell?
foot kick was perfect. I nailed that. The basics were good. It was the donkey kick, which was awesome. I was like, you
Yeah,
see what
that worked.
happens when you don't get the basics right?
That's right. No, excuse me while I head to the ER.
Yeah, fortunately, I was golden, and I was like, thank you that I exercise and do yoga, and
Yeah.
and do resistance work all the time. I'm up and down off the floor doing burpees and stuff all the time. So I was like, if I hadn't been, I'm not sure I would have recovered so well from that fall. So
Which goes into exactly what we're saying too. I
yeah.
mean, as you get older, I mean, they're just things. If you don't use it, you are going to lose it. And that's why all this,
Exactly.
and you brought it up, we kind of use it like news. We say the good news for NEWS for nutrition, exercise, water, and sleep. And if you could put all that in there, good nutrition, good exercise, water, sleep, people think that as you get older, you just have to you're just naturally going to get on more and more medication and fatter and more lethargic. And that is not true at all. That is not true. I mean, I'm 61 and I feel better now than I've ever felt. I'm leaner than I've ever been. I lift heavier than I've ever lifted, and I just have more energy. It's so that don't fall into that path of thinking
No,
as you get older, you get worse. It doesn't happen.
totally. That drives me crazy every time I have somebody coming in. Oh, it's just aging. I'm like, absolutely, it isn't.
Yeah.
It's aging because you haven't done anything and you've just let it go. And, it's a couple things there. One is the line of independence, and the other is that good news. I actually thought about starting a cable channel called the Good News Channel. And partly to impart to people, that was one of the frustrations that I have and had and certainly continue to have as a physician, is just hope being taken away from people.
Mhm.
So you have cardiovascular disease, you're going to have to be on these medicines for the rest of your life. Oh, you have cancer, you're going to have to, it's going to suck and it's going to be this, and you have this amount of years to live, and this is what, and people just, there's not a lot of hope and out there, and people don't get a lot of great news about the fact that they have so much of a role to play in their own health.
Yeah.
And so, wanted to have this cable channel where, talking about more good news stories with regard to anything, any news story about, the good stuff that's happening out there, not
Right.
all these dramatic things. Yes, it is serious, and yes, there is, really serious things to think about. But hey, here's a positive outcome, or here's hope, or here's some positive things. And oh, by the way, during this commercial break, we're going to split the screen. And while you're watching these commercials, because we do need to fund it, that's a reality, but
Yeah.
you're going to do these exercises, you're going to do this movement, or eat this snack, or whatever. And here's how to prep the snack, or here's the movement you can do instead of sitting. And again, just getting older, more
Yeah.
insulin resistant as you're sitting there, because you sat at work, you came home, you did a quick microwave dinner, now you're sitting and you're going to go to sleep and repeat tomorrow. And I
Right.
understand there's pressures out there, but we definitely need to understand the other side of the coin.
Right. And stress is so horrible on the
Oh
body,
boy.
just horrible. And if people really have to figure out, because if you watch the news, you're going to be stressed out 100, all the time. That's their job, is to make you stressed so you continue to watch. And if people could just realize there are of course there's bad things going on, but if you can't control it, don't give it any mind, because all it's doing is hurting you, and it's hurting you in a big way. You do not want to have your body in a fight or flight mode continuously. We aren't made that way. And I think that has a lot to do also why people are a lot sicker now. They're just stressed out about everything. And man, being able to relax is huge.
Oh, it's unbelievably transformative if you can, and when you can, and you should, and it can just help the body. I mean, I just again, another patient last week who was just so plugged into the news at all times. We had a little agreement that he was going to try, and a lot of times with patients, what I'll ask them to do if they just think, oh, I can't do it, I'm not going to be able, I'm like, okay, so you're thinking a lifetime, or you're thinking this huge amount that I'm going to have to put in. Let's just break it up. Let's just do 2 weeks. See how you feel. And you can do that. You can do anything almost for 2 weeks or a week or two.
Right.
Let's see how that goes. And this guy was plugged into his iPhone at all times, social media. He was plugged into, it doesn't really matter what news network.
Right.
Um, and he was just getting tons of bad news, to the point he was, I mean, not paranoid, but he was definitely worried about and stressed about absolutely everything.
Right.
And he would come in and just blah, and I'd be like, let's take a breath, and let's talk about it. And I turned him on to James Nestor's book Breath, and he started taking that. I was like, go hike here in town, it's not going to take you very long, it's right there, just go do it, sit down for a while, and breathe. And he came back, and his whole persona, he just looked different.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And that
See
was
that?
just that. We just worked on stress.
See, and that's what's awesome. That's what I love about the way you can practice your medicine, because I know a lot of the physicians, most of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say most of the physicians don't know anything about nutrition at all. Just like as
Yep.
pharmacists, I didn't know anything about nutrition.
Right.
We weren't taught that, unless you have a reason to go and study it on your own. That's not something we're given. It's not something that we do, and therefore, when you're only given whatever 10 minutes, 5 minutes that you're allowed with each patient because you're also owned by a bigger corporation, hospital, or whatever, and if you've only got 10 to 15 minutes, you're not going to sit there and start talking to somebody about nutrition when you really don't know yourself. And it's so easy to give a medication, although you're well aware that all medications have adverse effects. So chances are you're going to be taking another medication later for that adverse effect and all that. So if somebody was wanting to get healthy, if they found out how totally important nutrition is, how would you recommend them bring that up to the doctor? Say they go into the doctor and the doctor says, "Oh, we just noticed that your glucose high. We need to put you on diabetic medicine, or your LDLs are high, so we're gonna put it on a statin, or whatever." How can a patient who wants to do nutrition, what's a good verbiage that they can use for the physician to say, "Why don't we not do that and try this?" Is there a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that I think is important. One is, going back to your point, physicians were given, I don't even know if I got a class on nutrition and the importance of it. Certainly not exercise, certainly not stress. We certainly learned probably about sleep and sleep physiology, but not truly what's happening. I'm not even sure back then we had truly understood hydration, maybe not. So you know, going into the office, understand that your physician likely isn't trained in that unless they've taken the time, right,
Right.
to
Exactly.
make that effort. And I certainly have. I've done a ton of reading, ton of further education with regard to this, and that's kind of funny, as you point out, in this conglomerate. I will never work for a hospital, and part of that is you have somebody across the table who's worrying about the bottom line, who doesn't fully understand health, has been brought up in a system where it's about the medication, the surgery, the radiology, the things that make them money.
Right.
They're like, well, why don't you just see the patient more often and talk to them, each time about, the exercise and nutrition? And there's numerous answers to that question. One being that each time the person comes in, if they're not well, we're gonna have to address that.
Mhm.
And two is, people don't want to come in all the time. They don't have the
Right.
time. They don't have the space in
The
their lives,
money.
as it is money, right? So they're getting charged a copay every time, and so you have to take the time. But there's a great documentary called Escape Fire. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
Um, I don't know how many years ago now, but it's been a few years. And I watched it. It talked
Is that on
about,
Amazon?
probably, yeah, Netflix,
Escape
Amazon.
Fire?
Escape Fire, yeah.
Okay.
And it talked about the healthcare industry, and again, how it's broken, how we're just giving more and more medications. And one of the doctors, I believe her line, I think it was her, said, it's a healthcare system with not enough health or care. It's a system lacking of care.
Right.
Um, but I don't think most doctors go into it that way. I think we go into it caring. I think we want to make a difference,
Oh,
but
yes.
we're not given the tools in order to do that. And the other thing, I think she or somebody else said, if I'm a physician and I'm given 15 minutes or 10 minutes
Mhm.
to do something for this patient in front of me, um, or and I have these looming debts of whatever, am I going to do a 15-minute talk on nutrition, or am I going to try and encourage them to get a catheterization? If I'm the one doing the catheterization, that's $1,500 versus $15,
Right.
right? It's obvious that if I'm a cardiologist, which way I'm going to pick.
Right.
And as a physician, I will tell you, I'm not crying or anything, and that's part of the reason I've done these other things. I don't make much money. If you look
Right.
at how much family physicians make, I'm not even on the scale. And I'm not
Yeah.
crying poor, but I'm not on that scale,
Right.
because I choose, instead of that 5, 10, 15-minute visit, I'm doing 20, half an hour, 45-minute visits with my patients, because I know too much at this point. There's no way that I can address their concerns and help them move in a direction if I am trying to educate them and prove to them what it takes. Because if I had the key to, yeah, okay, this person's coming in, I know their entire genetics, their epigenetics, what's going to move them towards health. You got to convince people, you got to help them understand, you got to get them out of this under this current system. Everybody
Right.
thinks that, the way to go is come in and get an antibiotic or a
Right.
diabetic med or an antidepressant. And it's much easier to be unhealthy, much easier to be
Oh,
healthy than to be healthy.
oh yeah. And I
So
think a lot of a lot of patients actually are here when they go into physician. If you were to sit there and just talk to them about how they can cure a lot of this just by changing their nutrition, they would leave mad thinking, you seriously, I
uh,
paid money to come in here for you to tell me about food. I want a medication. It's they
oh,
don't
I've been
realize how
cussed.
horrible meds are.
Steve, I've been cussed out. I've literally been cussed out and been told to do my job. And, I used to get so upset about that. I used to
Mhm,
just take it on. I'm an empath, fortunately or unfortunately. And I used to just take it on. I mean, I could tell you stories about like the egregiousness of it.
mhm.
It doesn't really matter. At this point, I'm like, hey, I get it. I understand where you are and what you want. There's other physicians. I'm just not the guy. I think I'm, practicing fantastic medicine, but I'm not your guy. And there's other docs out there, and I'm sorry, I'll just not charge them for that day or whatever, and move on. But you're
And
right.
And
People
that goes
leave mad.
both ways. That goes both ways. If you go into a physician and you want to take control of your health,
Yeah,
you
that's
want to
true.
do this with nutrition, and the doctor won't let you say, "Oh, no, no, you've got to have this statin or whatever other
Yeah,
drug that 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 are done with studies that are funded by the drug companies and the food
yeah,
companies." I mean, that you
yeah.
got to realize that these studies that everybody talks about are usually funded by the drug companies or food companies.
Right.
So it's the same way. If you go in and do that to physicians, oh no, you can't do this with nutrition. Then you say the same thing. Well, I'm sorry, then I must not be the right patient for you, and I'll find me another physician.
True.
Or how could they say that?
Yeah, no, yeah, I would say, I just having that conversation. Hey, look, I realize, what your training was, but I've been doing these studies. You go to PubMed, Steve, and you put in, healthy nutrition or cruciferous vegetables and heart disease, or cruciferous vegetables and cancer, or you put in keto and diabetes, or keto and weight loss, or whatever it is that your line of thinking is, and you just
Right.
go into PubMed, which is open to the public. You
Uh-huh.
may not get the entire study because that you may have to pay for that, but
Get
you'll
the
at least get
abstract anyway.
abstracts. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you present that to your physician. You say, hey, I've got a plan. All I need you to do, if you live in a small town and there's not an integrative or holistic doc, say, hey, all I need you to do is please monitor my lipids, my inflammatory markers, my insulin, my insulin resistance markers. And if they don't know what those are, you can certainly, look at LFTs and again, insulin C peptides, uric acid, hemoglobin A1Cs, or,
Mhm.
or just fasting glucose, or you could even ask them for a continuous glucose monitor. And now, it used to be at $200 for 2 weeks. Freestyle Libre is $75 for a month now, which is a lot of money for some folks, but
Right.
tremendously worth it.
Oh my gosh, the information you can glean from that is
Oh, yeah,
huge,
yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Wearing a Whoom or some other type of watch, or the Oura Ring or something, and looking at your heart rate variability, what your resting heart rate is, what your heart rate recovery is, what your blood pressure. I mean, there's so many things that you
Right.
can monitor. Show your doc, say, hey, look, I totally get it. You want me on meds? I got it. I understand that that's what you told. I understand there's our studies to support that, but here's my approach. With the caveat, Steve, that I would say it does depend. So if you're 50 to 50 or 40, older than 45-year-old guy, or older than 50-year-old female, or maybe younger if you've got a tremendous family history, if you're smoking, if your risk factors look terrible, and there's numerous things that we look at, but your blood pressure's out of control, your weight's out of control, your inflammatory markers out of control, your lipid, specifically your particle number is really high, or
Right.
all those things are just really high, you may want to be thrown a sort of life raft until you can make until those changes can have because the last thing you want to be doing is going out exercising at high risk
Right.
if you don't fully understand that and have an event. And 25% of people, the first sign of a heart attack is death. It's
Yeah.
not great.
No.
I have these people come to me and say, they were previously healthy and then they died. I was like, well, no,
Then they
that's
weren't
how
for this guy.
limited our understanding is. They were
Right.
not healthy. And that
Right.
what I try to show people is like, on a fuel gauge, you have empty and full. If E was full of health and F was failure, if you will, you have that scale of health, where
Mhm.
you're you're young and you've got an amazing amount of oxidative stress capacity, anti-inflammatory capacity, your glutathione's fantastic, everything's going pretty well. Yeah, you probably have little disease, but as you get older, you're accumulating these factors, you're accumulating these senescent cells, these cells that are just not functioning as they were, and they losing their identity as what they are, possibly going towards cancer, possibly towards cardiovascular disease or dementia, or whatever other process. um, a disease, a cell that's not at ease or dis-ease is a disease cell. And
Right.
so, people need to understand that. But as that scale moves that way, you can move it the other way. And
Right.
that's what I'm trying to impart that knowledge to my patients. And I love what you're doing and other podcasters like you who are getting out there and trying to help people understand there's such a benefit to moving the needle in different ways.
Oh, it is. I mean, I without a doubt, I have found my God-given passion. As soon as I found, because I didn't know anything about nutrition until 4 years ago,
Wow.
and once I was asked to give a talk on childhood obesity, that's when I started looking into the nutrition and information and think, "Oh my gosh, we have been wrong since our guidelines came out," and a little bit before. It's like it's crazy, and now that you're in these communities and you see all these people that are reversing everything. They're reversing their cancer, they're reversing their skin conditions, reversing type 2 diabetes and getting off their medications. And it's like, oh my gosh, I want to be this. I retired from sick care and I'm finally
Hmm.
feel like I'm in healthcare after I've lived 61 years of my life,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm still going with what I wanted is helping people get healthy. I was wondering, do you do insulin levels? Do you measure people's insulin levels?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that expensive?
It can be. It can be expensive. A lot of insurance companies just won't pay for it,
That's what I
and
heard.
these third party or these large companies just charge an egregious amount. I mean, what they charge for insulin. I mean, even vitamin D, which everybody was measuring that at one point. I don't know how much it cost these companies. $16 at the most, $40, probably not even that much. They were charging for sometimes 200, 300,
Wow,
$400.
that is
And
so
then
ridiculous.
if you were lucky enough to have insurance and the insurance company went back and said, there's no way that's costing you that much. We'll pay this much. And if you haven't met your deductible, at least that's the amount you're paying, that agreed upon amount. But if you didn't have insurance, holy moly, those
Right.
are the guys that are totally getting, can I say screwed?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
totally getting screwed.
I guess you can. See, and that's the deal also because I mean, as we've known, we've known for a while now about type 2 diabetes not being a glucose problem, it's an insulin problem, but yet all the medications, most of the medication we give to bring glucose down actually raise our insulin. So we're actually making type 2 diabetes worse. And that's why I was wondering, like, if this is so well known that it seems to be in the realm that we're in and been in the last 4 years, I don't know why we can't get more people to do it. And that's why I was wondering if that's the reason because it's expensive to do it. But having a
Well,
checking your
people,
insulin levels over glucose levels is by far better determinant.
well, I mean, I think they're both important, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, people don't even really understand insulin. I mean, what does insulin do, right? So,
Right.
does it just control your glucose? No, insulin
No.
is imperative to our survival, but that was 3,000 years ago, right? So,
Mhm.
in the end part of summer and fall, when food was more plethoric, when there was more food around, we were having sweeter foods and driving our insulin up a little bit, and and what insulin is, an anabolic steroid. It was driving fat into
Yep.
those cells. It was creating the storage that we could have for the wintertime, right?
Right.
So we could maybe
Exactly.
survive,
Right. Just
you
like
know, and
bears.
they're just like bears, exactly.
Yeah.
And we would come out of it, hopefully alive and on the other side. But now we have that 365, 24/7. And people just don't understand what insulin is doing to our cells and
Yep.
that physiologic effect. And once you start helping them understand that, they're like, wow, I don't want that. Why would I possibly want that? At the right time, sure, go for it. It can be great.
Right.
If you're a bodybuilder or an athlete and you're trying to bulk, or you just need, you just had an illness and you lost a bunch of weight and what have you, and you need to build a little bit, you can use your insulin
or fight or
very
flight.
positively. Yeah, exactly. And so, but for the most part, we are turning it on way too much, way too high most of the time,
Yeah.
and that's what our cell is seeing, and it's having a horrible physiologic effect, where the mitochondria is just completely confused. The cell's not able to respond at all anymore to the glucose that we're giving it, and then glucose is toxic
Yep.
to the system because it's just sitting outside the cell because we become insulin resistant. So yes, absolutely checking insulins. I'm doing more and more continuous glucose monitors for my patients. And certainly looking at these lipid markers, inflammatory markers, oxidative stress markers, fatty liver. We can see that now. What's remarkable about fatty liver is, when I came through residency again, this was how many of years ago, 25 plus years ago. I feel like the ALT, the high on ALT was maybe 28, 30.
Mhm.
The high on ALT now, the high level of normal,
Yeah.
because we're such a sick society, I think has gone up to 42 or 43, 45. I mean, it's high,
See, and,
just
and just so you guys know, if you don't know what ALT and AST, those are liver enzymes. So if
right.
those are elevated, then that's kind of indicative. It's not, it doesn't actually prove it, but it is indicative when you put it together with other things to prove that maybe you are getting liver damage. So that's what he's talking about when he talks about ALT or AST.
Yeah. I mean, there's these precursor markers. Your fasting glucose above 94, you're starting to show some insulin, sensitivity problems or some insulin resistance. And so, yeah, you need to start thinking about checking insulin and showing somebody what's going on. And this is not a path we want to go down. Let's turn this around while understanding, what's driving it. And, there's lots of things driving it. But part of that is we're, again, going back to fairly unhappy society. So we look for things that generate what we think is happy because we're told we need to be happy, or and that's sugar. Sugar is a dopamine blast.
Yep.
And we got to be so careful of that dopamine. I'm actually reading Dopamine Nation, I believe it's called.
Mhm.
Just really interesting, sort of telling me a lot of what I already know, but sort of giving me data points that I'm like, oh my gosh,
Oh yeah.
pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that there is a true sugar addiction, that you're chemically addicted to sugar just like you would be cocaine. The only thing people don't think about is cocaine. You see it really quick, so people know that that's bad for you. But with
Right.
sugar, it just takes over so long. It could take 10, 20, 30 years for the accumulation to start building up. And now you're not too late, but now you're way late in the game. It's going to be harder to reverse it. So if we can just kind of get people to realize this before, maybe they can stop all that.
Yeah, but Steve, I've seen hemoglobin A1Cs as high as 12.4, 13.6, maybe higher, but pretty darn tootin' high. And
Uh-huh.
people start reeling it in slowly, understanding the process like you did, and bringing it down to 6.4. And I'm not sure I've gotten much lower than that if they started up that high
Right.
at this point. But I feel like we could, if maybe they did a little bit more resistance training or what have you, built more
Right.
muscle. It's remarkable. I almost very rarely will I tell my patients, hey, we really need to think about, terminal care. There are obviously times, but and those are unfortunate. But I almost always feel like there's hope and there's help and there's something we can do to turn the system around, because
Right.
ultimately it's a system that's very interested in survival. It's very interested in being healthy. You just got to give it the right tools. That's
Right.
imperative, and the consistency of it. So if you're like, hey, I ate dinner really well, but
Right.
I didn't do well with breakfast and lunch, and the snacks I ate were crap.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. And
you're
they
good
won't tell
luck.
you that part. Oh, I had a
Y-
great lunch.
yeah. Had a salad for lunch, Dr. Katz, you'd be so happy. Or, keto approach with veggies and
Yeah.
protein, and you'd be so impressed. Well, what did you do the rest of the day, and how was your stress control? And again, these things are synergistic. I mean, it's remarkable. You put one thing in front of the other, and it can be really bad, or you synergistically positive. Exercise is fantastic.
Right.
But boy,
At the right
exercise
time.
and,
Yeah.
and nutrition, whew,
Yeah.
yeah, so fantastic.
See, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking to people. We're actually putting a program together. We're going to actually help people walk them through and getting healthy. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about is that at first, if you're really obese, if you're 50, 100 pounds overweight, that's not the time to start in a big big exercise program. Walk. Everybody should walk. Everybody has got to move. You got to get off the couch. And walk further and further each day or each week. Monitor how far you're walking and everything. But man, so many people use that as an excuse for not getting healthy. They're like, oh, I'd like to get healthy, but I don't know how to work out, or I don't know, I don't have a place to work out, or I don't have the time to work out, or the money, or the knowledge, or blah, blah, blah. It's all about
Right.
exercise. And they use it more as an excuse for not getting healthy. It's like, that's why we're saying, just don't worry about that yet. When you start taking care of your nutrition, the weight starts coming off, you will feel better. I mean, it's just a natural, I've been through it. You just feel so much energy, so much pride of yourself that now you want to do more with that energy. And that's when a good workout program can come in. So timing is good too. And educating the young, which goes
Mm-hmm.
into what you're talking, what you did, is
Mm-hmm.
another thing. We're wanting to try to educate people. The younger we can get them understanding, the better their life's going to be in the future. And Dr. Katz has also written a children's book about this, as well as he has his own supplement company. So if
Mm-hmm.
you don't mind, I wouldn't mind you kind of telling us about that and how the book come about and all that.
Yeah, as a physician, I'm not a good selfless promoter or into marketing at all, but these things are important as you figure out. Yeah, so the supplement company came about. We had been in the supplement company as the four friends the four of us that went into it. We had we're in with a previous supplement company. We got out of that company, and unfortunately, we were faced with one of my partner's wives had cancer, and we worked together to be able to get her cells out and grow her cells. This was fairly unfortunately late in her in her cancer, and one of the molecules which I had actually not heard of. My partner. A PhD is just this brilliant guy, so he knows how to grow these cells. He's been doing an amazing job. So he's growing these cells and then subjecting the cells to certain phytonutrients. And one of them was this molecule called sulforaphane. Again, I was not familiar with it at all at the time. Certainly, I'd heard of curcumin and ECGC and some others, but not sulforaphane. And sulforaphane factored extremely highly in inhibiting her cells, her cancer cells, and being very helpful to her non-cancerous cells.
Hmm.
And so we were charged by her to figure out a way to make this supplement because sulforaphane comes from most strongly from broccoli seed, broccoli sprouts, not very high in broccoli, even though broccoli remains the
Huh.
queen or king of nutrition. Very, very healthy cruciferous, but sulforaphane is not very high. It is very high in seed and very high in sprout, but
Huh.
she wasn't able to eat a ton of sprouts at the time, so we were juicing it. It just doesn't taste good. It's pretty it hits the palate hard, we'll say that. And so
Yeah.
she charged us with trying to figure out a way to get into the capsule while stabilize it first.
Uh-huh.
So it's a molecule that's not stable. So stabilize it, get into supplement, and our PhD is just absolutely brilliant. So he worked hard at stabilizing, and we're the first company in the world actually who stabilized it naturally. There is another company who did it, but not completely naturally. So we're the first company in the world that stabilized it naturally, and then put it in a capsule and have gotten it out there. It is broccoli. We're now a company called Mara Labs, and we changed our names. Mara was her name, and so we changed our names to Mara Labs. And really, what we're trying to work on is this understanding of bioavailability. And so there's so many supplements out there, and you put in just about any phytochemical. Again, you go back to PubMed and you put in almost any phytochemical with almost any disease process, and you'll get a fairly positive result. Certainly with sulforaphane, certainly with curcumin, resveratrol, some of these molecules. But the problem is what is happening at the cellular level. So when they study it a lot, they doing cell culture and they just putting these phytochemicals on cells. So there's no bioavailability problem. It's bioavailable. It's right
Right.
there. And they see these tremendous effects. And so these supplements go out and buy this phytochemical, put it in a capsule and say, here it is. Well, it's not that simple. First, you have to get it from here to the stomach through this acidic environment milieu of the stomach, to the small intestine, have it absorbed in the small intestine where things are generally absorbed, and then into the cell and, absorbed. So some of these molecules are large, some are small. How you get absorbed, how do you get it through the endothelium, these basement membranes, into the vasculature, through the liver, and to the cell. And that's what we work really hard on. So we are, from start to finish, we make all our product here. We're not going out and buying a supplement, and then we're creating these shells if needed, restabilizing if needed, whatever it needs to get to where it's absorbed and into the system. So we work really hard on bioavailability and having a clinically significant outcome. And honestly, that's why I feel like a lot of supplements people don't feel an effect, or they get poo-pooed so much, is because there's no bioavailable.
Literally.
Yeah, or they poo-pooed out,
Yeah.
because it's not making a clinically significant effect. And that's really what we're trying to work on and educate people around. So we're pretty proud of that. A lot of hard work. None of us are marketers. None of us are. We're more interested in the science, and we're more interested in getting good product out there. It's been a hard battle because we've realized how difficult that is from a marketing standpoint. So we've had a lot of tough losses there, but we've been consistent. And again, that consistency has paid. A lot of our people subscribe and listen to us and use our products, realize what we have. And we do have a guarantee, because we realize, not everybody's going to have that same effect. So if you don't, we want to give you a money back 30-day guarantee. So we do that.
So they will see a difference in 30 days?
With some of these, like curcumin, you'll see it differently. Sulforaphane, possibly longer, possibly quicker. It all depends on your physiology and what's happening, and what your ability to create glutathione, your precursor molecules, what your vitamin intake is, if you're looking for that, if you need that. So it really depends on the system you're working with and the genome you're working with. But a lot of people see it very quickly. Others take a little longer, but we'll see an effect.
What are the other conditions that you see besides, you talked about cancer as far as the sulforaphane? So are there other conditions that like who would be taking your product? What kind
Well,
of condition?
sulforaphane is a phenomenal molecule with regard to oxidative stress. So every disease process has oxidative stress. So
Yeah.
it works on a system to address that 200 genes to address oxidative stress. So it's got a pretty magnificent effect. It has been touted as the detox molecule, so it helps phase 2 detox. And again, as I was talking about toxicity in our environment, especially in America, Europe's different. Europe, you have to prove that a molecule's safe before you can put it out there. In America, we have to prove that it's causing a problem before we'll take it off, but we'll introduce it. And then we have to prove it's a problem. And that's hard, especially with a molecule like glyphosate, which has, fairly well proven track record as far as killing weeds, but boy, it sure is killing our microbiome and
Big
creating
time.
significant other problems within our system. But trying to get it off the market, whew, boy. I mean, look at tobacco, Steve.
I know.
Lord, how long did
Isn't
it
it
take us to get
ridiculous?
turn that around?
And it's still going.
And
I mean, you
sugar.
still see new
And yeah,
kids coming up
absolutely.
smoking again. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah,
Yeah,
sugar.
vaping. Yeah.
We'll never beat the sugar industry, the drug industry, the
Never say
processed
never.
food industry.
I
Yeah.
think people, I mean, yeah, I mean, you drive through parts of Pennsylvania, Maryland, and you just realize how big a job we have to educate folks. I mean, any state really, but there's parts that are just, pretty, it's the system, they've got their grocery stores don't have much of vegetables, fresh vegetables, and there's McDonald's and the rest of the fast food industry there, and there's not a lot of healthy options, and so we've got a lot of work to do there.
Yes.
And so that is what it is. But I think there's a movement, there's a wave, and I would hate to say never.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely feel the wave. I think
Yeah,
it's grown huge just since I've been in here. It seems
yeah.
like it's getting big because we were going to conferences about 3 years ago, and now we go to the same conferences, and it's like tripled, quadrupled in the amount of participants. And I love that. I love that people are
Yeah.
starting to actually taking their, like you said, take their health into their own hands now. I
Yeah, I
love
mean,
that.
even where we met, Momentum in the Mountains
Yeah.
in West Virginia, that's just impressive. I mean, getting there is no easy feat. And, we had Dom D'Agostino and you
Yeah.
and just phenomenal people
Nina
speaking.
Teichholz. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, exactly. I mean, she's a force.
Oh,
Holy
I know,
moly.
I know. I hope to
Uh,
get her on a podcast.
yeah, absolutely. She's amazing. And so Kirk Parsley was there, and he
Oh,
wasn't
I
even
know.
speaking, and he was there.
He's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so there was, it was just pretty amazing, and the people cooking, and it was just it
Yeah,
was
Bill Schindler. Man, that meal Bill Schindler and Christina made, that was fantastic.
Yes, indeed. It was amazing. So, and that's momentum, as you're pointing out, and it's in the mountains of West
Yeah,
Virginia, which is, beautiful, but not easy to get to. And, these two individuals have changed their lives around and
yep.
hopefully, and certainly changing others, which is great. So
Oh, I know.
hopefully the momentum's there and hopefully it's working the right way.
Yeah, I think they're doing a great job. And just
Yeah.
real quick, we've only got a few minutes left, but tell me, how did you when did you decide to write a children's book? Was this new or
Yeah, so I'm a family physician, so I see kids from birth all the way to when they're getting into their 90s plus, and I had these frustrated parents who come in because I do talk about nutrition all the time, and their parents were like, "Well, tell me about it. How can I introduce something? Tell me about nutrition." And so I do love what fruits and vegetables, well, specifically vegetables, but fruits as well for kids to combine the two, what they can do to really help. The microbiome with insoluble soluble fibers and what have you, and all these phytochemicals. And so the front part of the book is trying to help kids understand how they can make themselves magnificent. It's called Making Magnificent You. And so I used to talk about like um, different things, a garden and what you'd put in the garden and why you wouldn't put like a Twizzler, and kids would be like, what?
yeah,
They don't garden,
exactly,
so they wouldn't be
exactly.
like, you would put this composted material in there, and what would you put in the compost, and kids would be like, they would be lost. And so I was driving along, and maybe this has to do with my British my well, I have British heritage, but my Jewish heritage. When I studied the Torah, we kept vowels out. So when you study the Torah, there's no vowels, and you have to study to learn it. And so I was like, why don't I take the vowels out of sentence? And the only way I can add the vowels back in is by eating fruits and vegetables. So when you say a sentence without vowels, it's very hard to understand. And so I'd have kids come in and I'd say, what do you want to tell your parent? But you're going to whisper in my ear, and I'd write it out, and I'd just say the consonants. And the
Right,
mom was like, what? Or vice versa.
yeah,
And I'd say, well, okay, now you can add a vowel, but this is name a vegetable, name your favorite vegetable, A-E-I-O-U. And they would eventually add it, and they would figure out the sentence. And I was like, well, now you can understand it. Now your system can understand how to function better if you're giving it all the right fruits and vegetables. And then the back of the book was for parents. So ultimately, I guess the elevator pitch is getting kids and parents on the same page to better
right,
nutrition.
right, right. That's wonderful. That's very, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And how long's it been out?
Since September of last year, so I guess I'm having a anniversary, 1 year anniversary. But just with having 4 kids, which I'm dedicated to, a wife and 4 kids, a business, a business that I work, you know, um, my health, I guess my insurance medical business takes a lot of time. I mean, as well, the way I practice and spend a lot of time with patients, I don't have a lot of time to look through labs and look through this throughout the day or answer questions. So I spend a lot of time after hours doing the electronic medical record. I'm sure people have heard now what a hard that was supposed to cure a lot of our woes, and it has added to a
Oh,
lot of our woes.
oh,
It's impressively oppressive. And
yep,
now they add all these quality measures that insurance companies deem as important. If you don't hit them, we get into trouble. Even if the patient's the one who's chosen not to do it, we get into trouble. So they dock your pay, they don't pay you as much. It's Healthcare is such a mess,
oh, I
such a
know.
mess.
And order
uh,
sets,
and it's not even healthcare. I should call it disease
sick
management.
care. That's what we call
Sick care,
sick
yeah.
care.
I mean, it's a sick system, sick care. However, I will say, and I've said, recently I was talking to somebody who was writing an article about healthcare, and I said the healthcare system is a complete train wreck, and you don't want to be in it unless you are in the train wreck, right?
Right,
So if you're in the train wreck, this is an amazing system. Emergencies, we have the best surgeons, the best outcome, a lot of very good outcomes with regard to that. It's brilliant, and I
right,
don't want to take it away from those physicians who are doing
exactly.
the best. I mean, they're great, but as far as disease management and chronic care management, we are so lost,
Yep.
and that's where we need to change the system around for sure. So it is a good system in some ways, but a horribly diseased system in a lot of other ways. And hopefully, with all the good work you're doing and these other podcasters, we can turn it around.
And you too. I commend you on being able to break away from that and get into a system that you truly feel we're actually helping people's health. That's huge, and I commend you for that.
Thank you.
I know it's not easy.
No, I mean, again, my biggest challenge is financially, and I'm hopefully going to make some changes in the not too distant future that will ease that up. I'm starting to get a little bit too old not to make the change, but if I get much older, it's going to be too late, sort of a
Right.
little too, doesn't make sense to make the change. So I think if I'm going to do anything, and the area I'm actually looking at is regenerative medicine.
Wow.
With AI, Steve, I don't know how much longer my job's going to be secure. I mean, I think AI is going to be able to look at your lab work and look at things and make a decision far quicker and possibly smarter than we can make. If you're doing functional medicine and looking at all these, biomarkers of health, and you're looking at, if you're looking at genomics and proteomics and metabolomics, and that's a lot for us to figure out.
Right.
AI can do it so much quicker, and oftentimes, almost all the time, they get it right. So we might be looking over their shoulder going, oh yeah, that makes sense. But AI is in my computer system right now. So the last week we've introduced AI into our system. It's not going to be long before it's telling me what to do. And
Right.
then it's going to be not long before, they go, well, do we really need you, Dr. Katz?
Right.
We can make better decisions without you, because some guy who, earned a Darden or other MBA is going to go, we don't need to pay that doc 100 plus
Right.
thousand.
Right.
We can get away without it, and I can now be doing it with AI, with maybe a doctor overseer. So, but regenerative medicine, that's going to be a little longer. I think it's got tremendous promise, especially with an aging population. I think there's great data out there that we can hold off on some joint replacements if we do it right.
Mhm.
And boy, a lot of people are needing those joint replacements, where
Yeah.
they've waited too long, bone on bone. And, now we can maybe offer them something that actually works.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. There's definitely
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of changes coming up. I
Yeah.
can definitely tell that.
Yeah.
So one last time, the name of your children's book is
It's called Making a Magnificent You,
Making
and
That
the role,
Magnificent You. Okay.
yeah, and the role of future investable. And so it's on Amazon and it's at Barnes and Noble if you have one of those near you. Target, Walmart. I mean, it's on all those things. My publisher made sure it was on that. And so, yeah, we are pretty much all over the place,
Good
and
deal.
trying to make a good deal there. And hopefully, I'll get back to marketing it a little bit more. But as I was saying, just so busy with kids and family and that and the supplement company, that I've had to put it on the back burner. But yeah, if you go out and get it,
Yeah.
and if you'd be so kind as to write a review, that is so incredibly helpful.
Yeah,
And
it
so,
really
yeah.
is. It really
And I
is.
worked hard on it, so hopefully we'll make a splash. And my kids help me. Each fruit and vegetable has a rhyme that goes with it that are completely corny. So if you come up with a better one, go to martinkatzmd.com and let me know what it is, and I'll publish that.
Okay, Martin Katz, MD, and that's Katz, Katz. And
Dot
then
MD.
they can okay, I'm sorry, say that again.
Sorry, yeah, you got it.
Mar
martinkatzmd.com. Let me check that. I think that's my website, and I'm, blogging on that fairly frequently. I think I owe it a few blogs, but believe that's my website. Um,
and then
it's funny
your
when you don't put it in, it's hard to remember exactly what it is.
yeah, I know. And
Yeah,
then
so
your company is Mara Labs, and that's MARA
hyphen
dash
labs.
hyphen labs, and
Hmm.
then just .com.
Yes, sir.
Good deal. Well, Martin,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Let everybody know anything burning in your
Yeah, I
mind?
mean, I just say again, just remember there's good news, just like you're saying. That's just so funny that you came up with that Nutrition X's.
Water and
What was
sleep.
the, yeah,
Water
yeah,
and
water
sleep.
and sleep. Yeah, I mean, it's just so brilliant. But just remember there's good news, there's hope, and there's help out there. You can do it. Yeah, we all talk about being happy and having fun, but understand this is not easy. It's going to take some hard work, so It's going to be a little grueling. It may not always be fun, but it's unbelievably worthwhile. It's unbelievably important. You're unbelievably important. Your system's unbelievably important. And you can make that change. I mean, if you look at these athletes who are just so big, they didn't get there by easy work. I mean, they put the hard work in.
Right.
They did what it takes to make a change to their body, and so can you. And again, it's worthwhile. Try and understand dopamine and what effect that's having, whether you're listening to the news and hearing things that you want to hear and it's increasing dopamine, or sugar, or tobacco, hopefully not drug, or alcohol, or pornography, or whatever it is that you're not, just getting you non-functional, dysfunctional. Understand dopamine, understand what it's doing, understand that you can have an effect by incorporating some things, reaching out to somebody who cares, who will listen, who will help you. Be consistent, plan. Nothing comes about without planning. You've got to plan for success. If you don't plan for success, you're likely it's going to end up in failure. And so
Right.
plan for that consistency, have it available to you, make sure it's there, hang out with people who support you, because if you're not, you can easily get distracted away from your goals. Just this weekend we were camping. I was camping with my two younger ones, which they're so mama centric. They love their mom, which is awesome.
Yeah.
My wife's amazing. She's a great mama. She's unbelievably great to my kids. She's really an amazing mom. I tell her she needs to start a blog all the time, helping these frustrated moms. And she can get frustrated too, but she's just so dedicated to it, helping our kids out. And I think they're all the better for it. But these two little ones don't often hang out. I don't think they've not spent the night with me without her being not too far away ever. Maybe once. They came out, we camped, and but then we had to pack up, we had to get stuff done, and the two of them are continuously distracting each other. And I'm like, this is what we need to do, stop distracting each other. And when they stopped and got it done, it's amazing how fast things move. But if they were distracting each other, boy, it just was not getting done. Anyway, that's
Right.
not neither here nor there. So yeah, so just
But it is.
understand all these things and put yourself in a place to succeed, and it's so well worth it.
Right. And don't get distracted by all the noise. There's a lot of stuff out there.
So much noise.
Just focus. If you don't do anything but just focus on your nutrition, you'd be amazed at what that difference makes. But and
Yeah, and forgive
and
yourself, Steve.
oh
That's the
yeah.
thing. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't take yourself so blooming seriously. Forgive yourself. This is not going to be perfect. Just get back on the wagon and keep going in a direction that makes sense. Yeah, and again, just because it worked for your neighbor doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Just, understand you're an individual. Your cells are different, possibly. It may work for you, it may not, but if it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. There are other options, and there
Yep.
is something that will work for you.
Yep. Well, good deal. Great advice. Thank you so much again for joining me today. This has been absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad that we actually got to meet in Virginia. That was wonderful. And
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
you're welcome. So, and for listeners, thank you so much again for listening, and have a great week. And remember, make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.
Take care of your human.